What's up guys, this is D2 from D2AOV.com, and today we are going to be going over Florentino, the new hero in Arena of Valor. Now if you want the written version of this video, go over to D2AOV.com. We have that article up. This is basically going to be the video version of this article, which means we're going to be going over his ability mechanics, his strategies, his strengths and weaknesses, his items, all that good stuff. So, without further ado, let's get started. Florentino is a warrior assassin, but his stats are closer to an assassin than that of a warrior's, and he has a couple big strengths and a couple big weaknesses. His biggest strength is one that you see right here. He just has never-ending combo potential. You see his 1 reduces the cooldown on his 2, his 2 reduces the cooldown on his 1, and he just keeps going and going and going until you're dead, basically. And his other major strength is that he's capable of killing both tanks and squishy heroes. In fact, he's probably the best tank killer in the entire game because he has something that no one else in the game possesses, and that is the ability to do HP, percentage of opponent HP damage combined with true damage, which is absolutely nuts. You're cutting through armor and you're cutting through HP stacking at the same exact time. Now, his two main weaknesses are one, that he's extremely hard to play. This combo, I mean, I'm screwing up here and there, but I'm more or less pulling it off. But this is extremely hard to do, even when it's a stationary target. In the midst of a game, this gets even harder to pull off. And even just getting to this point took me well over an hour of practice. So yeah, he's definitely difficult, and you definitely need to put in the time to practice him. His second major weakness is his lack of mobility if there aren't heroes nearby. Now, if I have my flowers, if there's a hero there, obviously I can lunge toward him, and that's decent mobility. The problem is if there are no targets around, I have no way to actually increase my mobility outside of my ultimate, which it's fairly long. You can't really... At the lowest, it's 25-second cooldown before CDR, so you don't really want to be using your ults to get away or get across the map, as it were, if you don't have to. He has one other way to run away, which is to use his 2 to activate Shuffle, but again, there needs to be a hero nearby. And if you want to use Lunge, then you basically have to lunge towards the opponent and then away, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense if you're trying to run away. The good news is that he's so good at dueling that typically you don't need to run away. But yeah, it is a major weakness. Actually, there is one more weakness, and it's kind of just related to the fact that it's hard to play. If you miss his combo, like for instance, if I do this and accidentally grab an extra flower, then all of a sudden my cooldowns are messed up. And if I miss a blossom, for instance, then I'm basically just helpless, and anyone can come ahead and kill me right here. So that's related to him being difficult to play. If you mess up on him, you're going to die. Alright, now let's talk about his abilities. Now, there's a lot to unpack here because if you take a look, they're all extremely long, just paragraphs for every single ability. So let's get started with his passive, which is called Shuffle, but really should be called Lunge. These are two different abilities. And not only that, but the ordering of this paragraph on the bottom here is a little bit strange. So I kind of rewrote the paragraph or the explanation, and I think this does a bit better job of explaining how it works. So essentially, when Florentino exits combat, his next normal attack becomes Lunge, which does extra damage based on additional AD, and it reduces their movement speed for a tiny bit of time, 0.5 seconds. If it hits an enemy hero, he heals, and then the attack afterward does a little bit of damage. Now, the moving part after Lunge is called Shuffle. So the actual attack, this is not called Shuffle, that's called Lunge. The little movement speed afterward is called Shuffle. Now let's try again. Let's wait. Actually, let me just get the flower up. So if I move the joystick while using Lunge, I will do this little, well, shuffle afterward, and that is the shuffle. See, he kind of moves afterward. He kind of just like dashes away. This is shuffle, not the actual lunge. And if you see, if I don't move my joystick while using lunge, I will not shuffle. And that is not indicated in the description. In the description, it just says, after lunge, shuffle enables Florentino. It's kind of like vague. It's like, well, it doesn't. You would assume that he just automatically uses shuffle, but that's not the case. You have to be moving the joystick during lunge in order to use the shuffle afterward. Otherwise, if you see I won't use the joystick, I just stop right at him, right? And I'll move the joystick, and I'll shuffle afterward. If you guys saw that. Now, this distinction is important because if you look at ability number 2, Triple Threat, it says shuffle is triggered at the end of the attacks. Now, if you didn't know better, you'd think that he would lunge at the end of each attack, but that's not the case. So if you're trying to use the combo, you'd think like, oh, okay, I'll use my 2, and then I'll activate lunge and then go again, which is not going to be the case unless you have a flower, which I happen to have there. The real situation is that he can shuffle away. So this is how he's able to use movement speed from his Triple Threat. So every time he uses 2, he can shuffle away like that, right? Now, it's the same exact thing as lunge. If you're not moving the joystick, he will not shuffle away. And this is really important for the combo, which we'll talk about in a second. So if you see here, I will press 2 and I will not use my joystick, and he doesn't shuffle away. Now, even if you try to move afterward, you will not shuffle away. So if you move your joystick after using shuffle, or excuse me, if you move your joystick after using either Triple Threat or lunge, you will not shuffle. You have to be moving the joystick while you're using either of those abilities. And you know there's proof in that by, you can just look at his movement speed, right? Right now I have 418 movement speed, and that will go up by 50% if I'm using shuffle. So if I just stand here, or if I use shuffle, hold on. If I use shuffle and immediately go to my stats, you see my movement speed jumped to 608. But if I don't use my joystick and I just stand here, I don't have the extra movement speed, right? So that is key to his mechanics. You need to be moving the joystick while using either Triple Threat or your lunge in order to move afterwards. And as you'll see in a second, you actually want to only be using your lunge, or excuse me, your shuffle after using Triple Threat, and not after you use your lunge, or else you're going to mess up your combo. All right, a couple more things on the passive before we move on. First thing is that, like we mentioned, if you don't activate the shuffle, then you won't have the CC immunity. So if you just do this, you're not going to have any CC immunity. Last thing is that the additional damage provided by lunge will actually be multiplied on a critical attack, and that is rare. Usually when something provides additional damage, like for instance, I don't know, Xanus's true damage on after his ultimate, that's just extra damage. It doesn't get multiplied whenever you crit, but this will crit. If you look, I will attack him. Oh, excuse me. Whoopsies. Let's make him not invincible. So, if I lunge at him, you see 2 big numbers there. Oh, that's kind of hard to tell because Thane has a bajillion armor roughly at the moment. One more time, let's just take a look. There you go. See, two big numbers. There we go. 2 big numbers. Now, the other thing is that the attack afterward will also benefit from the extra damage, or the extra damage will benefit from critical damage as well. You see towards the middle there. His next attack within a short period of time also deals additional 20% damage. And so you'll see here, there's the crit. And this next attack also does extra damage. You see 289 versus 244 there, which is normal. So basically, it multiplies it by 120%, then by 200%. So it kind of compounds on itself. All right, let's talk about Blossom, his first ability here. So let's just read it. Florentino tosses a dart that deals damage to the first target hits and stuns them for 0.75 seconds. 3 flowers blossom next to the target for 5 seconds, and Florentino touches any of them. His energy is restored by 100, and his next normal attack becomes lunge. Cooldown for Triple Threat is also reset. So the energy is really important here because if you take a look, Triple Threat costs 100, and you only have 200 energy to start with. So if you just try to Triple Threat and Triple Threat again, then you won't have enough energy for your third Triple Threat unless you have flowers. So that's why it's important. But there is a bit of an error here in the description. So cooldown for triple threat is not necessarily reset. So if you saw there, if you take a look at if you watch this, look at the cooldown for triple threat. It's 2 and then 0, then 2, then 0, then 4. So even though it says cooldown 4, what's really going on here is that triple threat has a cooldown of 4 seconds and a charge time of 2 seconds. Now, every time you pick up a flower, that cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds. Or like either the charge time or the cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds. So if you're between strikes 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, the cooldown will go from 2 to 0, and so therefore you will have reduced the cooldown to 0. However, if you're between strikes 3 and 1, then the cooldown is 4, and you'll have reduced the cooldown from 4 seconds to 2 seconds, and it's not necessarily reset. And you can see that if you kind of start in the middle of your combo, which happens sometimes. So I do this, that's 2, that's 3, and you see it went from 4 to 2, did not reset. So keep that in mind. It doesn't necessarily reset it. It only reduces by 2 seconds. It will always reduce it if you're in a charge time like this. See, it goes down to 0, goes down to 0. We're all good. But if you find yourself in the middle of a combo, you kind of want to go in, but you're in the middle of a combo like this, be aware that it's not going to completely reset back down to 0. Okay. Now that we got that out of the way, let's turn cooldown off so we can show something else for you. Every time you shoot someone, one flower will appear right in front of you, and the other two will appear 120 degrees apart from the first one, as you can see. No matter where you shoot from, one will always appear in front of you, which is nice because you know exactly how to approach. So yeah, one will appear in front of you, the other two will appear 120 degrees from that. Next thing to talk about is that the flowers can't land on walls, so they will land in the closest terrain nearby. As you can see there, they kind of just like get stuck there. Sometimes if you got a minion close to like the wall or something, it'll hop the wall. Let me try to make that work. Something like that. You can see. Basically, sometimes it'll hop the wall, but it'll basically land where it tries to land. And if it can't land, then it'll land in the closest terrain nearby. Moving on, let's talk about Triple Threat, Florentino's second ability. Let's go ahead and read it. Florentino attacks the target 3 times, each strike dealing true damage equal to blah 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 of target's max HP. Shuffle is triggered at the end of the attacks. If Triple Threat hits an enemy hero, the cooldown of Blossom is reduced by 1 second. So this is what makes his ability, or his combo potential so strong, because like we mentioned earlier, each flower reduces the cooldown of Triple Threat by 2 seconds, and Triple Threat, if all 3 strikes connect, it reduces the cooldown of Blossom by 4 seconds. Now you may be wondering, why 4 seconds if it's only 3 attacks? Well, the last part of Triple Threat attacks twice, which means it reduces the cooldown of Blossom twice. And I tested this in super duper slow motion. I took a video and looked at it very, very closely, and it is indeed the case that the last strike, since it hits twice, will reduce the cooldown of Blossom by 2 seconds. That's really cool, which means you can continuously, just in a cycle, do this over and over and over again. Next thing. So, once you use your first Triple Threat, you have 5 seconds to use the next one, or else it goes on cooldown and you wait 4 seconds. And like I mentioned earlier, between the first and second strike and the second and third strike, it's a 2-second charge time. It's not necessarily a cooldown time. So that allows you to immediately reset like this. One thing that's really important is that Florentino cannot use Triple Threat while in the middle of shuffle. So basically, while you're moving away like this, Triple Threat, it's visibly inactive. Let's just wait. Let's just turn off cooldown for a second. So I'm going to lunge and look at Triple Threat. It's going to have a big X over it. Okay, maybe it wasn't an X, but it was unable to be used, if you guys saw. Let's try again. No, actually there was an X. Okay. So, as you guys can see, you cannot use it, which is not a really big deal if you're in the middle of a combo, but it's a really big deal if you're trying to pull off the combo and you screw up and you accidentally lunge and shuffle past the hero and you're trying to use Triple Threat at the same time. Like, I'll show you. You do this, and you lunge past, and you're like, oh, darn it, I need to use my 2, and then, yeah, just things go to hell. Okay, next thing is that the true damage portion does a maximum of 400 damage to monsters, as you can see here. So the last thing I'll talk about with triple threats is it's really, really good. That's the only thing I'll really say, because of the fact that it has 2 separate sources of damage, right? The physical damage is really good against squishier heroes, whereas the percentage-based true damage is ridiculous against tanks. And this is why you need to build at least some damage, even if you're building them very tanky. You need some damage because this will rip through tanks completely. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the invincibility on Thane here, and you'll see what I mean. So at the very end there, you saw it was 1500 and 1900 damage. Part of that was Fenrir's Tooth, but still, it's absolutely nuts. And this is a tank, by the way, with basically a full build. He has lots and lots of armor. He has almost 1400 armor. And I just did 2 combos to take him out. Florentino is nuts at killing tanks. Finally, let's take a look at his ultimate, Gentleman's Duel. It's somewhat straightforward. Florentino charges for a brief period before dashing forward, starting a duel with the first enemy he counters for 5 seconds, during which the target's armor is reduced by 25%, and his damage dealt is increased by 20%. I think the armor reduced is, 15% at level 1, 20% at level 2. He is immune from control effects from the targets that are not in a duel, and takes 50% less damage from those targets. So everyone else, he takes less damage, and is CC immune. If the target dies during the duel, Florentino gains 20 attack damage for the rest of the match. This buff stacks up to 10 times. So that's potentially 200 damage. It's kind of hard to get all 200 damage, but still, that's a really big deal. Because you can, if you're able to potentially build him tankily, or if it gets to like the super late game, but you have that extra damage, you can build tanky and still do a ton of damage, which increases the potential by a lot. He's very Xanus-like in that fashion. But as far as the mechanics go, it's pretty straightforward. One thing to point out is that it says encounters he starts with a duel with the first enemy. That should say hero, because you can't duel a monster. No dueling monsters, unfortunately. And the second thing, just semantics, just so you guys know. When you start a duel with someone, you see the white lines. When the white lines reach the bottom of Thane, the duel's over. So that's a good, nice little indicator to see how much time you have. Okay, now for the moment you've all been waiting for, Florentino's combo, his infamous combo. Now, if you look at a bunch of videos, go to Reddit, then it's probably really confusing. A bunch of F's and 2's and A's, F standing for flower, and it's like Blossom, FA2 to AF, FA2, and yeah, it's just, you don't want to be memorizing that stuff. You want it to be easy, you want it to be simple, and that's what I'm going to bring to you today. But before we get to that, let's talk about a few do's and don'ts. Number 1, always start with Blossom. Now, this may seem kind of wasteful, because you may be thinking, oh, I can lunge in, and then Blossom, and then I get another lunge because of the flower. But that's a bad idea, for a few reasons. First of all, if you miss your Blossom, if you lunge in, and then you miss your Blossom, okay, well, actually, let me do it. If you lunge in, and then miss your Blossom, then you're dead. Your Blossom's going to be on cooldown for another 8 seconds, and they can just kill you, and you have no way to run other than perhaps your ults. But if you're using your ult to get away from a failed engage, then you're doing it wrong. Number 2, if you lunge in, you're probably going to be moving the joystick towards the opponent, and if you try to auto aim Blossom while shuffling, you're going to miss the Blossom. There you go. There, it missed. So you think like, oh, I'm point blank. Let me just spam auto aim and it'll automatically hit him. It's like, no, you're facing the wrong direction and it'll go off in the distance. Finally, even if you manage to perfectly get in there and lunge into his face, and you get the blossom off correctly, and you're in this position, you still are going to have to shuffle back into the flower because you don't have lunge. So in the end, you're basically have the same amount of attacks in the end anyway, because you're right in his face, right? So you're not losing any attacks by starting off with Blossom, and it's way safer. It's just what you want to be doing. Okay. Second thing, do not spam when you're doing the combo. Because if you spam, you're going to accidentally use things at the wrong time. You're going to not get your shuffle off, or excuse me, not get your triple threat off because you're shuffling, because you're using the joystick at the wrong time. You want to perfectly time the movements of your joystick and the shuffles, because you don't want to shuffle on your lunge, but you do want to shuffle on your triple threats. If you accidentally just spam buttons the entire time, you're going to mess up, and you're going to be using shuffle by accident when you're lunging, and that's not a good time. Okay, here it is, the combo. Are you ready? It's very simple. Lunge in, 2 out. Lunge in, 2 out. And by 2 out, I mean use your triple threat and the fact that you can shuffle afterwards to propel yourself away from the hero and towards the flower. And again, do not use shuffle while you're lunging because you're going to mess up the combo. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the combo is not just... I've seen this before. I saw this on the official Thailand ROV channel when they were showing the combo. Do not do the thing where you lunge, triple threat, walk over the flower, and then use your 2, and then walk over the flower. You need to use the shuffle after you 2, because standing there and using your 2 is not going to work in an actual fight. They're not going to stand there and let you do that to them. This combo right here, not going to work, because they're not going to stand there and let you do it. You have to use your shuffle off of the triple threat to get to the flowers and get back to them. And the nice thing is that even if Thane is like running away or doing what have you, then you can actually use your triple threat to dash even backwards to the flowers, and it will still be beneficial in the end because you'll have the lunge to get back towards him. So even when you think they're running away, you can probably catch up back to them by using the triple threat to your advantage to get to the shuffle, to get to the flower, and then lunge back into their faces. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this combo is not as easy as it looks. I spent a long time practicing this combo, which is I'm making it look easy, even though it took me forever to do. And this is what you want to be doing. Just go to training and practice a lot of different angles, practice going to different flowers at different times. Even though it's a stationary target, this is still kind of difficult to do if you're not used to it, especially because it requires precise timing on when to move the joystick. If you're frantically pressing buttons, you're going to be using the joystick at the wrong time. And so it's basically like playing the piano, right? If you just want the muscle memory in where you're pointing the joystick at the right time. Then once you get used to this, you can start incorporating the ultimate. Now, if you're dealing with a squishy, you can probably just use the ultimate at the very beginning. Just use your Blossom, dash in, use the ult, then use your 2. Like so. And if you're dealing with a tankier hero, then perhaps you want to more safely get the stack. So you want to use it toward the end. And how you do that is you can just go in, use your 2, go back again, and before your final 2, then use your ultimate. And then by that time, you'll have your next combo up, and you can go ahead and kill them. I mean, obviously, this is a very idealistic world where they're letting you kill them, but, it's possible. There's also the possibility of just using your ult between your second and third strike, or before the second strike, I should say. And I'll go ahead and show that to you now. Like so. But I would say it's obviously up to personal experience when you want to use it. Sometimes you'll just use it right at the end to guarantee yourself the stack, because really the attack damage is extremely important. You can also use your ult, myriad of other ways, either running away, to prevent the other team from CCing you, all that kind of good stuff. But if you're trying to guarantee the stack, or you're trying to guarantee the kill in general, I would say early on for squishies and later on for tanks as they're running away. You can even use your ult on a guaranteed kill just to make sure that you get the stack. So once you've had enough practice messing around on a stationary thing, you can go ahead and turn on the AI and try your luck out with an active Thane or any other hero. Thane is probably the best to use, as you can see me screwing up, because he's so annoying in trading that it kind of mimics a real game, whereas other heroes might be a bit too easy. But yeah, Thane is pretty annoying. He does weird stuff. So if you can land it on Thane, then you're probably in good shape. And it's nice because you get to do things like, head towards your flowers, be in a situation where he's running away, but you're still using your flowers to get it back to him, all that kind of stuff. You can mix in your ult if you want. If you're feeling really confident, you can turn off both of you guys' invincibility and see who can actually win. Let me just upgrade him so I can use his mana again. Yeah, this can get a bit dicey because he has a full item build and I do not. But if you turn on both your item builds, it's actually an unfair fight. Like, you kill him way too easily. So yeah, but this is, I think I would go about this. I would train with this hero a lot more than you normally would other heroes. Put him in training mode, then put him against bots, and then play casual, and then play ranked. This is one of those heroes that you want to get a ton of practice on in a myriad of circumstances before you even think about bringing him to ranked matches. Well, now that we've gone over the main points, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. You definitely want to level up Blossom first, so you can do this little fun combo. Now, this is the one situation where you actually do want to use Shuffle off of Lunge. I'll show you guys once more. So before you wanted to stop at him so you could triple threat away, but in this case you actually do want to use Shuffle so that you can keep going and get the combo off really quickly. But that's the only time in the game really, is pre-level 2, that you want to do that. Then, once you get triple threat, obviously you hit a pretty big power spike because you'll be able to start getting not only damage off, but you'll get the faster cooldown resets on your Lunge, or excuse me, on your Blossom, so you can get your Lunges off. And you can do a little dance over and over and over again. Obviously, once you get to level 4, you're going to want to pick Gentleman's Duel, but Florentino's power spike really happens at level 2 when you can start just running circles around people. As far as level 3 on, it's kind of up to personal preference. Leveling up Blossom gives him an extra 40 damage per level plus 0.4 seconds of cooldown. The damage isn't really that important because you just want the flowers. You can land it on minions. You don't really have to land it on the hero, although the stun is nice to be able to engage on someone. Whereas for triple threat, the damage goes up 80 for the first and second strike, and it goes up by 50 on the third strike, which is doubled, so it's actually 100. And that's a really big deal, especially if you're trying, especially in the early game when people's armor isn't that high, and you want to be able to have, maximize that physical damage. So I would say that the more experienced a player is, the more likely they're going to choose triple threat, because that's just a lot of damage to be passing up. And if you're less experienced and you're going to be missing some of the combos, or you just want the lower CDR, then go ahead and pick Blossom, particularly because Florentino doesn't have a whole lot of CDR in his item build. I mentioned before that Florentino doesn't really have great movement abilities if you're not engaging with a hero, but there are ways to escape. The first obvious one is his ultimate, but aside from that, what you can do is, if someone's on your tail, if you're 2.5 meters away or 250 units away, you can use triple threat to get away, because you can just shuffle off of it. You don't have to use Lunge to go in and shuffle out. You can basically just use the shuffle from triple threat. And if they're still chasing you, the second triple threat will stun them in the air, and you'll be able to use the shuffle as well. The thing to keep in mind is that your triple threat will lower the cooldown of your Blossom regardless of whether, you're mid combo. So say you miss your Blossom and you're running away. Using your triple threat will help you get your Blossom back up. And once you have your Blossom back up, it's easy to just start your combo once more. So that's basically it. You want to just keep running and running and running with your triple threats. And if you find an opportunity, maybe you re-engage. But otherwise, yeah, you're going to want to use your triple threat to basically run away. So, how do you counter Florentino? Well, it's not that easy, but you have to remember that everything revolves around Blossom. Everything revolves around his flower. So, the first thing you want to do is make him miss Blossom. Better yet, get him in a compromising position and then make him miss Blossom and then chase him down and kill him. Because, like I mentioned, without Blossom, without his flowers, he doesn't have a lot to his disposal in order to get away. He can maybe ult, but then you're making him waste his ults. He has a little bit of shuffle, but that's really about it. Just go ahead and take him out. He doesn't have a bunch of defense. Most of his defense just is in the fact that he can, duel you and get a lot of lifesteal that way. But with no flowers, he can't do that. If you do see flowers on the ground, either stun him so that he can't pick up any flowers. But the problem with that is that there are small pockets of CC immunity when he uses his shuffle after the triple threat. So, even better than stunning him is to knock him away, like with Thane's Charge or Superman's Charge or something like that. If you have a knockback, that is a great way to push him away from his flowers. If you don't have a great way to keep him from his flowers, just run. It's not worth trying to kill him unless he literally has 10% life and you're the next shot is going to kill him. If he's half and you're similar or maybe even slightly ahead in terms of hero count, even if you're 2v1 and he has 60% health, you're probably going to want to run away because those flowers will be the end of you. As far as Arcana is concerned, he benefits off of additional attack damage, so the standard Onslaught, Assassinate, and Skewer. It's probably better to go for Assassinate rather than Gorilla, just because Assassinate, he doesn't really need attack speed. You're just attacking periodically anyway. You're not trying to just spam out attacks. You can go Atrocity because, again, his Lunge does fully benefit from critical attacks, but it's a bit risky. If you like to live dangerously, if you like to live with RNG, then you can go for Atrocity. Otherwise, probably best to just go for the standard Onslaught. Lastly, let's get into his items, get to the items that you probably want to have on him. The first one that's pretty obvious is Mantle of Ra. It's just great on all DS laners, all your Darkslayer laners. It provides him the additional AD, nice 80 damage, and a nice amount of armor so that he can survive lots of incoming attacks. So it's a nice hybrid item for most heroes. Yeah, there's nothing really special for Florentino here. It's just really great on a lot of DS laners. The next item you want to be thinking about is Rank Breaker. Now, he already does both percentage of max XP damage and true damage to tank, so you don't really need Muramasa. It's not even necessary at all. And by the time you get your the CDR from your Blossom up at level 6, you're not going to really need CDR anyway, as long as you're getting your combo off. Your flowers are going to be enough. So you don't need either the CDR or the percentage-based pierce. You just want as much attack damage as possible, and Rank Breaker provides that. Not only that, but the Windwalk, it's actually pretty useful, especially because, like we mentioned, Florentino doesn't have great movement abilities, and so if you're just rotating around the map, if you die, you're trying to come back onto, to the field of battle, then you're gonna want that movement speed. So Rank Breaker is one of his more key items. Apart from everything I just said, obviously you want to be killing squishies as well. So Rank Breaker this is one of the few heroes where it's like a slam dunk, right? A lot of times Muramasa is the pick of a Rank Breaker, but this is the exact opposite. You're going to want to be picking Rank Breaker over Muramasa almost every single time for Florentino. Next item that I like is Frost Cape. And the reason why I like it is just basically for the slow. There's a little bit of defense in there as well, but the slow is really important Because if you look at the slow on Lunge, it's only 70% for 0.5 seconds. So it's really, really short. And Frostcape provides an AoE slow. So they'll be stuck in the area. And when they're stuck in the area, that means that you get to pick up your flowers and go kill them. If you're not going to be picking up Frostcape, then you're probably going to want to pick up Omni Arms. First, because it provides you just a ton of stats. And a ton of stats that Florentino likes, but also because of the elemental power that does more damage after using ability. That's basically what Florentino does. That's all he does, is use ability and weave in attacks between. It's part of his combo. So yeah, you're probably going to want to be picking up one of those in your build. I think one of the more important items is probably Fenrir's Tooth, just because if you have Fenrir's Tooth plus Florentino's kit is absolute death for tanks. It's ridiculously hard for them to keep up, because not only does Fenrir's Tooth convert into that true damage because of the percentage-based damage on his triple threat, but that, on top of that, is also multiplied by 30% when they're below 50% health. So you're basically doing percentage damage and then multiply that by 130% when they're low, and it's ridiculously painful for tanks. Next, we have Clavis Sancti, and we talked about it earlier, but when you lunge, you actually benefit, all the additional damage benefits from crit, and to be able to multiply that by 2.5 rather than 2 is great, and also it gives you 90 attack damage, which provides you extra AD, which you want. So Clavis Sancti, a very good pick as well. Switching back over to defense, if you want some magic defense, you go for a Gaia Standard for the most part. Because of that movement speed, you want to be able to get to your flowers, you want to be able to get to your targets, and just having that extra regen while you're darting around is super nice as well. Finally, talking about his boots, it's almost always going to be Gilded Greaves, because you do not want to be locked down. You want to get to your flowers as quickly as possible. Yeah, you're going to be in the DS lane, in which case Sonic Boots is going to, for the most part, Sonic Boots is very strong in the DS lane, but I think this is an exception, because Gilded Greaves, you're just going to want to get to your flowers. That's the biggest point for him. I've seen sites go for flashy boots. That's not a good idea. He doesn't need CDR at all. None of these matter as well. So one build that I've kind of come up with, which is pretty nice in my opinion, is to start off with that rank breaker, get that damage and get that speed coming up on the back onto the field, like I mentioned earlier. Then go into Gilded Greaves. Then after that, you go into Clavis Sancti for even more damage. And then from there, you go into Frostcape to keep them in place. By that point, you need some magic defense, so you go for Gaia Standard. And then you finish off with the Fenrir's Tooth so that you can start killing all those tanks. And this is actually pretty ridiculous if you watch. Let me just upgrade myself. Just doing a normal combo on Thane will just absolutely devastate him, as you'll see. One combo, and he's lower than half health, and this is a Thane with a ton of stats. Normally, if you pick like a Violet or anything like that, it takes forever to take Thane that far down. But Florentino, easy peasy. That is going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this nearly 40-minute video. I promise to make them shorter in the future. But while we're here, make sure you head over to d2aov.com. It's a brand new website that's going to be having AoV guides and news, a new article almost every single day. And while you're at it, make sure you subscribe to the channel. This is a brand new YouTube channel that I'm going to be dedicating to YouTube guides. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is the very first video. I'm glad to start it. See you guys later.